I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, White House Summit. President Biden hosts leaders from the Philippines and Japan to discuss the rising threat from China. Crisis in the Middle East. How Israel is responding to calls for more humanitarian aid to be delivered to Gaza. Unhealthy outlook. Analysis of Catholic hospitals that are performing surgeries that go against church teaching. And after-school clubs. Two friends from a Catholic high school in Pittsburgh are teaming up at the Masters. We'll explain these stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Stanislaus. Our top story tonight, President Joe Biden hosts a trilateral summit at the White House, meeting with the president of the Philippines and the Japanese prime minister. The main focus, China and keeping peace in the Indo-Pacific. Relations between China and the Philippines have been repeatedly tested by skirmishes. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
President Biden has raised concerns about China's operations in the South China Sea. In fact, President Biden recently spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping discussing that very issue. Now, keep in mind the U.S. is treaty obligated to defend the Philippines. The trilateral meeting, a display of unity in the quest for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific.
In the East Room of the White House, President Joe Biden meets with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida.
When we stand as one, we're able to forge a better future for all.
The administration earlier describing the significance of the trilateral and what's at stake.
Our three countries embark on this new era of trilateral cooperation as trusted, equal partners guided by shared values and an unwavering commitment to a free, open, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific.
On Capitol Hill, Prime Minister Kishida also addressed lawmakers.
I'm truly honored to speak here in this citadel of democracy.
He warned China's current military actions are a great and unprecedented challenge to global peace and security.
Without the presence of the United States, how long before the Indo-Pacific would face even harsher realities?
The U.S. and Japan call on China to stop dangerous and escalatory behavior in the South China Sea. Two Chinese Coast Guard ships recently blasted water cannons at a Filipino boat. A Chinese spokesperson slammed the U.S. and Japan for the statement and criticized the U.S. for trying to keep computer chips from going to the Chinese military. President Biden has made improving relations with the Philippines a priority.
It shows the strength of the U.S. alliance and how important it is for these two countries to speak with one another and have this meeting.
The U.S.-Japan-Philippines summit, an effort to bolster regional cooperation in the face of China's aggression.
Also tonight, the summit has a large economic component, with several major U.S.-based companies announcing investments in the Philippines. And President Biden is already planning to welcome other world leaders here to Washington next week. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
One ominous warning from North Korea's leader. He tells young soldiers to be more prepared than ever before for war. Kim Jong-un made the statement during a visit to the socialist country's Military Education Institute. He also said Pyongyang should be more firmly and perfectly prepared for war. The remarks came after another series of missile tests and military exercises. South Korea's opposition party has won a landslide victory in the country's parliamentary election.
총선 결과는 민주당의 승리가 아니라 우리 국민들의 위대한 승리입니다.
The opposition party won 20 more seats than in the 2020 elections. It is a crushing blow to conservative President Yoon Suk-yeol and his party after the ruling party's defeat. Several top aides, including the prime minister, offered to resign. The results are seen as an indication of public sentiment, as Yoon's approval ratings have remained below 40% for most of his term in office. In Vietnam, a court has sentenced one of the world's richest women to death in a rare verdict. Real estate tycoon 67-year-old Trung My Lan was found guilty for her role in a $12.4 billion financial fraud case. She is one of the few women to ever be sentenced to death in Vietnam for a white-collar crime. Her arrest and trial were among the most high-profile results from an ongoing anti-corruption campaign. Len's attorney says they will appeal the case. All right, now to the Middle East, where the need for aid in Gaza increases by the day. The Israelis now say they have a plan to facilitate more aid into the region.
We are constructing the Northern Crossing, a new land crossing from Israel into northern Gaza, to enable more aid to flow directly to civilians in the areas that have been challenging for the trucks to access.
Well, the IDF says that it will carry on its efforts to facilitate entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. International outcry has sounded loudly since the deaths of aid workers in an Israeli airstrike just last week. Well, FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before Congress about the department's 2025 budget, but he also warned lawmakers of his concerns over potential bad actors carrying out attacks on U.S. soil due to events overseas.
But now, increasingly concerning is the potential for a coordinated attack here in the homeland, akin to the ISIS-K attack we saw at the Russia concert hall just a couple weeks ago.
In his testimony, Wray also urged Congress to reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which lays the groundwork for the government to be able to collect the communications of non-Americans overseas on U.S.-based platforms without the use of a warrant. The FBI's budget is facing a $500 million decrease in 2025. The Republican House leadership is once again hanging on by a thread. It was only 6 months ago when far-right members of the House ousted then-Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and now Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is threatening to do it once again. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more on a closed-door meeting between the Speaker and a Georgia Republican.
Good evening, Tracy. Just ahead of the Easter break, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion to remove House Speaker Mike Johnson. This week, she and the Speaker had what she described as a passionate 70-minute meeting. Afterwards, the Georgia lawmaker still says discontent with this Speaker is spreading.
But it's pretty clear and obvious and being whispered among the conference. Mike Johnson does not have the support of the conference. The letter that I sent has been well received, and it was basically speaking the quiet part out loud.
After 19 Republicans voted this week with Democrats to bring down the FISA reauthorization bill, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is now waiting to see what the Speaker does with the Senate-passed Ukraine aid bill, which has been on his desk for months.
The funding of Ukraine must end. We are not responsible for a war in Ukraine. We're responsible for the war on our border, and I made that clear to Speaker Johnson.
She's a colleague. I've always considered her a friend. Marjorie and I don't disagree, I don't think, on any matter of philosophy. We're both conservatives, but we do disagree sometimes on strategy.
Many House lawmakers tell me Speaker Johnson is doing the best he can, now with a one-seat majority.
Look, if Speaker Johnson brings Ukraine aid to the floor and other aid packages to the floor and does the right thing, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene seeks to remove him or moves to remove him, I think that Democrats would join in a motion to kill such a maneuver.
The idea of having another vacate the chair, I don't think there's even some of the people that voted to do it against Speaker McCarthy, and again, that was only 8 Republicans at that time. I think I've heard most of them all say right now they wouldn't do that at this time.
I think Marjorie is kind of letting her concerns be known, and to the wider public and to the Speaker directly. And I think he's probably considering that in his actions. I don't think that Marjorie is probably alone in her feelings. I don't know what the intensity is.
Others tell me the chaos must stop.
We just need to get back to doing the work of the American people and find a path forward that is bipartisan, that can save the integrity and and sort of the prestige of the People's House.
So is it the beginning of the end for Speaker Johnson? Time will tell. On Friday, former President Donald Trump and Johnson will be meeting to discuss election integrity at the former president's Mar-a-Lago club. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
On out to Arizona, where reaction to a newly revived near-total abortion ban has reached a fever pitch.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
With those words echoing throughout the State House, abortion advocates repeatedly called on Republicans to repeal the law. Pro-life lawmakers say the law should not be repealed without a conversation.
The Supreme Court returned the authority to regulate abortion to the states, where it rightfully belongs. The Arizona Supreme Court's 47-page ruling was released just yesterday, and 24 hours later, chants from the floor of shame, shame, at us simply because we do not want to repeal the pre-Roe law without first having a conversation about it.
And Representative Martinez, who you just heard from, also added that removing healthy babies from healthy mothers is not health care and that pregnancy is not an illness. The Biden administration has finalized rules to close what is referred to as the gun show loophole. That is a gap in federal regulations which allowed people to sell firearms at gun shows online or other places outside of stores without requiring a background check. Under the rule released today by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or ATF, that changes. The law expands the definition of those who are engaged in the business of selling guns at a profit, requiring them to register as a federally licensed firearms dealer and conduct background checks. Let's bring in Mark Barden, co-founder and CEO of the Sandy Hook Promise Action Fund. He lost his son Daniel in the tragic mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut back in 2012. Since then, he has dedicated himself to preventing gun violence. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Before we get into this new rule, would you mind quickly sharing with us a little bit about your son, Daniel? What would you want people to know about him?
Thank you, Tracy. Daniel was just a light of compassion. He really noticed other people. We used to call him the caretaker of all living things. He was just a very compassionate little boy. He was aware of others, and he was a light in this world. And we will forever just be devastated that he was taken from us in such violence when he was 7 years old in his first grade classroom.
Yeah, I know most people can't even fathom this. It's so hard. So thank you for talking to us. Mark, what do you think about this new rule? I mean, how significant do you think it is? And if it were in place back in 2012, do you think it could have prevented your son's death?
I don't go through all the little minutia of what piece of legislation could have prevented that. What my role at Sandy Hook Promise is we want to prevent other families from having to endure this lifetime of pain due to losing a loved one to preventable gun violence. And we know that the background check does work. The research informs us that. It's been around for 30 years in licensed firearm dealers. And so what this law does is it addresses a loophole where people are selling firearms at a high volume without having a license and not conducting background checks. So this just addresses those nearly 25 or somewhere maybe over 25,000 individuals who are engaged in the business selling firearms at a high volume that are not licensed. And they need to be licensed and they need to be conducting background checks because folks who are prohibited know that this loophole exists and intentionally go to these dealers to buy firearms when they would be stopped otherwise by the background check.
Yeah, Mark, what else do you think needs to be done to keep weapons out of the hands of people who should not possess them? I mean, a lot of times, too, people who shouldn't have these guns maybe buy them illegally, or they are able to pass a background check in some way. So what else do you think needs to happen?
Things that responsible gun owners are already doing should be the law of the land. So that when a tragedy happens because someone negligently leaves a firearm accessible to a toddler, that there will be accountability. So safe and secure storage of firearms in the home should be the law of the land. There are other tools at our disposal, like the temporary transfer. If somebody is a known threat to themselves or others, their firearms can be held elsewhere until they're safe to resume ownership. So there are tools, in addition to the background checks, that are available to us that do save lives and protect the Second Amendment. But this piece of legislation that has just been announced today is huge. It's the largest, most significant piece of legislation to come since the background checks were implemented in 1994. And we've been advocating for this for over 11 years. Since the aftermath of the tragedy in Sandy Hook, we've been working on this steadfastly all along. So this is a huge victory, and it's a significant step toward universal background checks, which we hope our Congress can achieve in a bipartisan way.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.
Well, O.J. Simpson, the fallen football star who was acquitted of charges that he killed his former wife and her friend, has died from cancer. Simpson later spent time in prison for an unrelated case. In college at USC, he won the Heisman Trophy in 1968. He then starred in the NFL and even had a stint in acting, appearing in movies. However, his achievements were overshadowed by the 1994 murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman. A criminal court found him not guilty. A subsequent civil trial found him liable. Simpson was surrounded by his children and grandchildren when he died. O.J. Simpson was 76 years old. And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including keeping the faith. Mary Rice Hassan tells us about Catholic hospitals performing procedures that go directly against church teaching. Welcome back. A federal appeals court heard arguments today in the bid for Arkansas's to ban so-called gender-affirming care for minors. A federal judge struck down the first in the nation ban last year, saying that it was unconstitutional. The case appears headed to the Supreme Court. Around 24 other states have enacted restrictions similar to those being sought in Arkansas. And in Idaho, a new measure aims to protect against the forced use of pronouns. The law allows government employees and students at public schools to not use names and pronouns that do not correspond with the biological sex of the other person. The proposal is set to take effect on July 1st. Well, a woman in Oregon is suing a Catholic hospital for professional malpractice because of what she says happened during so-called gender-affirming care. 33-year-old Camille Caffel says that a plastic surgeon violated her duty of reasonable care when performing a double mastectomy for not discussing the procedure's risks at the time of the surgery. Caffel identified as non-binary. Additionally, the lawsuit against Providence Milwaukie Hospital alleges that it did not obtain proper mental health clearance. The lawsuit comes on the heels of the release of the Vatican's document Dignitas Infita, which in part condemns transgenderism and sex change surgery, calling it a grave violation of human dignity. And joining us now with more is Mary Rice Hassan, Cato Byrne Fellow in Catholic Studies at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and Director of the Person and Identity Project. Mary, good to be with you today. When we read about this lawsuit, I mean, many of us were pretty shocked. We had no idea that Catholic hospitals were performing these types of procedures that clearly go against the Church's position. How can they do that and still deem themselves a Catholic institution?
Well, they shouldn't be doing these procedures, and that's clear, and it's something that the bishops are taking pains to address, because there now is going to be a revision of the ethical and religious directives that bind Catholic healthcare institutions, which the previous version of those directives did not directly address many of the questions that come up in terms of hormonal or surgical intervention. It outlawed sterilization, but some of these other things, certain healthcare organizations would claim a sort of an agnosticism, that they weren't sure whether or not they could do these. But really, we know from Catholic teaching that these kinds of interventions they're wrong, they're harmful to the person, and you end up with these situations like what this detransitioner has experienced, where she was lost her breasts and underwent all sorts of interventions that caused serious harm to her. So it's unfortunate, but the reality is there are some Catholic healthcare institutions that have gone against Catholic teaching and have performed these sorts of interventions.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question, Mary, is, do you think this is an isolated incident, or is this potentially happening at other Catholic hospitals?
Yeah, one of the things that's problematic is we have a lot of Catholic healthcare in this country, which is a great thing. But as many of these healthcare institutions, whether it's Providence or Franciscan, or as they've expanded and gone into mergers with other hospitals, there's a complexity in the legal arrangements, and sometimes there's political pushback. But I think the bigger problem is that for many of these larger healthcare chains or networks, that many times their lay board has lost the vision. So they may say they're still operating in the Catholic tradition and use Catholic in their language or maybe in their imagery. But for all practical purposes, they have abandoned the Catholic ethical framework. So it's unfortunately more prevalent than you might think. And even in writing in Catholic healthcare journals, you see healthcare practitioners defending these sorts of interventions. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And hopefully we won't see too many more of these sorts of things happening.
Absolutely. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I'm wondering, even non-for-profit hospitals, right, they need to make money, and these surgeries and other so-called gender-affirming care procedures can be very costly and in some cases ongoing. What part do you think that money plays into any of this at all, if at all?
Yeah, I think money has been a big driver, but I think that's going to backfire, because to the extent that hospitals have sponsored gender clinics or have been willing to allow their surgeons to perform these kinds of interventions, as the pendulum has swung back and people have become aware, just simply from a medical perspective, how harmful these interventions are, you're going to see a lot more medical malpractice claims. So that promise of easy money, which may have lured in certain healthcare providers and hospital networks, I think is going to prove to be the Achilles heel, because it really is just going to backfire, because bad medicine is going to be costly.
Absolutely. Mary, quickly, wondering about this. I mean, can these hospitals, can they lose their standing with the church, or lose any accreditations for these actions?
Sure. The bishop within his own diocese has the authority to judge whether someone can use that Catholic label. Now, this is complicated by the fact that, again, many of these healthcare networks are across multiple states, and the corporate documents are not always clear. And then there's the question of whether there's goodwill. Are they willing to listen to the authority of the bishop? Are they really committed to that Catholic identity? Or are the leaders of those healthcare networks more interested in just operating as the typical, unfortunately, secular healthcare institutions that are prioritizing not the well-being of patients and the principle of doing no harm and doing good, but rather political expediency and perhaps easy money?
Yeah, well, Mary, thank you so much for coming on and sorting this all out, and for all of your insights. We really appreciate it. God bless.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, he called President Biden a cafeteria Catholic. Now, Cardinal Wilton Gregory is explaining that statement in an interview with EWTN. Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. is receiving a special award from the North American College Seminary in Rome. Courtney Morez, Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency, had the opportunity to interview Cardinal Gregory before the event.
What would you like to see more of from President Biden that would make him less of a cafeteria Catholic? What menu items is he missing?
Well, first of all, I respect the president, as I said publicly. I believe that he is a sincere man of faith. I really do believe that. I would just ask that he would somehow find a way to better allow his personal religious convictions to engage in the public forum. But you know, and I know, that when you're in the public life, you find that hook that you can use to your advantage. Sometimes finding the hook means that you find yourself in conflict with a church teaching. But that would be my hope.
Can you share with us a little bit about your experience as a Black Catholic leader in America?
Well, first of all, I'm humbled to even hear that question, because I know that the honor that was given to me by Pope Francis rested solidly on the faith of African American Catholics. Even in times when we weren't respected or understood or honored, we remained faithful. And the fact that I can enjoy the office knowing that it rests on the quality of goodness, faith, and charity of the African American community humbles me deeply, as you can hear in my voice.
Yes, yes. And I also want to ask you about the National Eucharistic Congress that's coming up. What does this mean for the life of the church in America, especially at a time when so many Americans haven't returned to Mass after the pandemic?
Well, I think the emphasis on Eucharistic revival and the attention that is being given to reinvigorating or initiating, for some who are younger, an awareness of the importance of Christ's Eucharistic presence in the Blessed Sacrament. I hope the end result is that we draw closer together as a family of faith around the altar that Christ sets for us, and then remains present as a gift from that altar. The emphasis on the real presence also should generate the next question. If Christ is really present and I receive him in the Eucharist, what does that demand of me? The Eucharist and his Eucharistic presence is a gift of unquestionable importance, but it's also a challenge that those of us who dine with him must live like him and have the same values that he expressed in the Gospels as his legacy of faith and love.
That's a beautiful message to end on. Thank you so much, Your Eminence.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Finally tonight, the Masters tournament is underway at Augusta National, and one golfer is there with a best friend from their Catholic high school in Pittsburgh. Local media reports Neil Shipley of Central Catholic High qualified for the prestigious event as his caddy. He chose, well, a friend and a fellow Central Catholic graduate, Carter Pitcairn. The pair had teamed up last year at the U.S. Amateur Championships, where Shipley finished second. Shipley is making his first appearance at the Masters. Congratulations to him. All right, and we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.